Need link building or content? Go to fatjoe.com. On-demand marketing services for agencies and teams. Fat Joe.
Hi, my name's Daniel. I know I'm the last thing between you and a beer, but stick with me because I'm here to talk to you about how to get 10 times better at SEO without learning any more SEO. Now, you might be thinking it's pretty bold to come to the UK's biggest SEO conference and say, hey, no need to learn any more SEO. And you might be right, but the fact is, our job is not just to know a lot. That's not what we get paid to do. In fact, the best SEO strategy in the world is worth absolutely nothing unless we can get it implemented. How do I know this? We had it. We had assembled the absolute SEO dream team. The technical SEO, so technical, he lists Screaming Frog Spider support as his emergency contact. And to be fair to them, they'd probably reply. We had the content strategist that does keyword research at the weekend for fun. And we had the digital PR that gets a follow link first time, every time. But despite this team, we just couldn't get the client to implement anything. Where did this leave them? In absolute SEO oblivion, aka page 2 of Google. Now, I don't think we're alone with this. I know how much everyone loves audience interaction, so if you have ever struggled to get an SEO ticket implemented, please now sit in silence. Wow, 100% of people. That just shows how ubiquitous a problem this is. So what can we do about it? Well, we need the right knowledge. Of course we do. But that alone is not enough. We also need to align with the right people. We now need to know how to talk to the right stakeholders. And we need to bring them the right information to make our argument convincing. Because of this, we need to be experts in soft skills. Now, I'm going to be honest, when I first heard I was on the soft skills track, I was a little bit pissed off, you know. I'm trying to get people 10 times better at SEO, and I'm on the soft skills track. But the fact of the matter is, the more I started thinking about it, I tore myself down, because soft skills, they have a bad rap. We all need soft skills day to day in everything we do. I'm not going to do another poll, but I'm willing to bet most people here have to communicate day in, day out. We have to be able to persuade people that SEO is necessary. And we need critical thinking, so when we do hit roadblocks, we know how to get past them. So, without further ado, how do we go about convincing the right people we need SEO? We need to tailor our approach. Now, I'm going to touch upon 3 different stakeholders that we talk to at different points in our day-to-day jobs. But first, I want to talk about the business as a whole. What are the goals of the business that you are talking to? This is one of the first questions we ask when we get a client at Novos. What are your business goals? And why do we do this? Well, it makes the benefit much more direct, much more persuasive if we can align SEO with their overall goals of the business. They know that we care about what they care about. They're more likely to implement things if they know that it's having a direct benefit on the business. It can also really change our SEO strategy. This is an example of Thread, one of our clients, and their homepage, frankly, isn't that good for SEO. There's no global navigation, there aren't that many internal links, and if we hadn't have asked them what their business goals were, a lot of our strategy would probably be based around improving this page. It's got so much value to it, why would it not be? But we spoke to them before, and we understood that actually, they didn't really want to drive conversions from their category pages. They wanted to drive sign-ups. That was worth much more to them as a business. And so it really changed our approach, and therefore made it more likely for them to get things implemented rather than push something through that actually wasn't any benefit to them at all. It can also really prevent our blushes. So this happened to me a few years ago. I've got a few people here from different agencies. It was in between the agencies, so it was at the middle company that this happened. I spent weeks and weeks on an audit, and I said to them, I think you should focus on plants as a category. I sort of waiting for the rapturous applause, pats on the back. But they never came. In fact, I was met with quite an awkward silence. And they said, yeah, we're deprecating those products. That's worth absolutely nothing to us. Highly, highly embarrassing. Learn from my mistakes. Get to know what the goals of the business are before you start as a very first step. So moving on to our stakeholders. Different stakeholders have very different needs, and so we need to talk to them in different ways and give them different data points in order to align with their needs. The first one I'm going to talk about is the head of department. Now, this can be any one of your sort of main primary points of contact at your client or internally in-house. So what do they care about? They care about channel growth, not just SEO, but channel growth as a whole. They care about overall marketing spend and how maybe to reduce or use this more effectively. And they care about the different departmental KPIs they are going to be judged on, they're going to be scored on. So we can talk to them about organic sessions, organic revenue. We can probably talk to them about more SEO-based metrics like rankings or visibility. They're more digitally literate. We also need to be really careful to give them forecasts and timelines. They are often the middle point between us and the rest of the business we're working with. So they need to know exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. We need to be super clear, so when they get asked, they can say, oh, this is what the SEO team are doing, and this is what they're trying to achieve with that. What do we want to avoid? Well, we want to avoid super technical jargon. They don't really care about server-side rendering versus client-side rendering. What they care about is the output of all that. We also don't want to be coming to them with problem after problem after problem. Too often, an SEO audit is literally just a massive list of issues of things that are wrong with the site. The head of the department's probably been working the site for a lot longer than we have. It's not a good look, and it doesn't help anyone. Instead, we want to talk about opportunities, growth, what's there to get excited about. So brilliant, you've managed to convince the head of the department, but they say, well, yeah, we've bought into SEO, but you need to convince the CEO. Everything goes through the CEO. Fair enough. How do we change our language? How do we change how we speak to the CEO compared to a head of department? Well, what do they care about? They care about the growth of the business as a whole. They might have to be secure funding. They might have shareholders that they need to make money for. They also care about relative growth versus competitors, and we'll touch upon how we can leverage that later for our own good. We want to talk about revenue. We want to talk about ROI when we're talking to the CEO. How is it driving the business forward? How is it making the business money? And obviously, we want to talk about the vision of the business, and that's where the business goals can come in really handy. Always tie things back, the SEO strategy back, to how it's driving the business forward with the CEO. What do we want to avoid? Well, if the head of department didn't care about server-side rendering, the CEO certainly won't. And frankly, I've never met a CEO that cares much about rankings, so avoid that at all costs. Also, don't focus too much on the individual tactics. What's the high-level strategy that's going to drive their business forward? Amazing. Achievement unlocked. You've convinced the CEO about SEO. That is no mean feat. Time to sit back, crack open a beer, maybe sip a cocktail, right? Well, unfortunately, not quite. Because one person stands in your way. The final boss. AKA the pissed off SEO skeptic dev. Now, I'm being harsh here because actually developers are absolutely crucial stakeholders in our day-to-day jobs. And we need to align with them and understand how we can communicate with them, how we should communicate with them in order to get things implemented. What do they care about? They care about the prioritization of tasks. They have so much to do on a website. They've got to keep it up and running, and every channel is fighting for their resource. So we need to prioritize what we're giving to them. What are the 1, 2, 3 things that are really going to drive growth? They don't want 100 different tactics from redirects to alt text. What is really going to drive growth for them? Also bring examples of the benefits that they can bring. If we can understand what their resourcing is and we can align what we want to do with their resourcing, even better. They're way more likely to get things implemented. How do we tailor our language? Well, whereas with the other people, we didn't want to be too technical. For devs, we do want to get more technical, as much as we can. We might want to be CMS specific. If they're on Shopify, we might want to talk about collections and apps. We want to be solution-driven. What have we done in the past that's worked? Was it an app? Was it a bit of HTML? How have we achieved in the past? That might not give them the whole answer, but at least it's going to give them an indication of where they might want to go and how they might be able to solve that. What we should avoid? Avoid vague language. Avoid unclear expectations. What you definitely don't want is going back and forth, slightly changing with what we wanted, each time something comes back. Very annoying, complete waste of time, and it's not likely they're going to get anything done for you in the future. And as I mentioned, avoid those huge lists of tickets. Please, please, please. It's not good for anyone. For every stakeholder, use inclusive language. We don't want it to be us versus them. It's not your website and our recommendations. It's how we can drive the growth forward together, how we can improve the website. Such a subtle distinction, but it can be really, really powerful. We are all on the same team, and too often it seems like it's us against them. Make sure our language reflects reality. So brilliant. You've got the right knowledge, and you now know how to convince the right people and align your communication to convince those people. But unfortunately, if you don't bring the right information, SEO is not going to be prioritized. I've touched upon a few different bits, but I'm going to dive into a bit more detail about how we can get that information for our stakeholders. So what's the size of the prize? The first thing we want is an opportunity analysis. What are we doing SEO for in the first place? To do this, I'm going to give a bit of an example. I have a client here who wants to understand whether they should go after chinos as a category or shirts as a category. So what I've done is I've got the keywords of interest and I've categorized them. I've then applied a blended click-through rate based on if they achieve a top 10 ranking, a top 5 ranking, or a top 3 ranking. And what I can see is T-shirts obviously shows more opportunity. Great, ready to take this to the head of department, right? Well, no. This doesn't really give any information about the actual website itself. Nothing specific about our client. It's just general search information. So what we need to do next is apply a blended click-through rate based on their current rankings and their realistic potential growth. So if they're in position 1 to 5, we might say, realistically, you can achieve a 1 to 3 position. If it's 6 to 10, maybe it's 1 to 5. What we see here is T-shirts still shows more search opportunity. Brill, ready to take to the CEO. Well, no, what have we just said? CEOs care about revenue. They don't really care about this search data nonsense. So then we want to apply category-specific conversion rate and average order value. What we can see is chinos has a much higher average order value and a much higher conversion rate. What that means is chinos has over 4 times the revenue opportunity of shirts. Completely flip what we had before if we were just looking at search data, just looking at ranking data. This is the sort of information you want to be taking to your stakeholders in order to convince them that SEO is what is needed to happen. Now, this next point, I didn't actually believe this at first, but I promise you, I've checked, I've double-checked, and this is completely true. Big numbers are bigger than small numbers. Promise you, look it up. But no, this is a really great point that Tom Critchlow talks about in his executive presence course, and I'd highly recommend that if you want to learn a bit more about how to talk to different stakeholders. But what he says is, in SEO, we often talk about monthly figures, monthly search volume. But actually, that's not the way that businesses run, really. When they're forecasting, when they're assigning budgets, they talk about yearly numbers. So if we take our monthly figures and just times them by 12, not only do we have a much bigger number, a much more convincing number, but also we're aligning with how the business operates. It's literally a win-win situation. Thought that was a really nice, really simple tactic, but one that is, again, really, really effective. Once we've got our opportunity analysis, we also want to present a forecast. What is realistic? Now, forecasting is very difficult. In no other area of life are we literally asked to predict the future and then held to that day in and day out. So how do we go about doing this? Well, what can we reasonably achieve based on our opportunity? We've already got that figure. So we might say, all right, we're going to plot if we can achieve 50% of this, 75% of this, or 100% of this. Gives us different levels of confidence, more realistic. We also need to understand that growth is not instant and it's not linear. We want to be transparent with what sort of growth we might be able to achieve with SEO. This will save sort of down the line arguments like why we're not seeing growth. Actually, it's not going to be linear, it's going to be a process. Get this sorted from the very beginning. You also want to forecast based on existing trends. So if a company's seen growth in the first year, you want to forecast based if they're going to continue that growth as a baseline and how SEO can benefit that on top of the baseline. You don't want to be going into these conversations saying, this is the growth SEO is going to bring, and actually they come back and say, well, we're already seeing that growth, so that's of no value to us. What I haven't included here is seasonality, and that is another really important point to look at when forecasting. But I haven't included it here because, as I say, forecasting is very hard. We wouldn't have the time. Also list all your assumptions, of which there will be Many. We're literally trying to predict the future here, so obviously we're going to have to use some assumptions. But we're not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. If you list them out, one, it shows how we got there. There's no perfect number for a forecast. So if we list our assumptions, we give the best bet to say, this is how we've got here. It also means if they don't agree with one of your assumptions, you can easily change it. We've been so transparent. We can just change the click-through rate. We can just change the average order value based on what they think the actual number is. We also need to understand what is the return on investment. Now, I learned about return on investment at a very young age, although at the time I didn't really realize it. This is a picture of me, my dad, and my older brother. And I still look just as clueless when I'm talking about SEO to clients as I do in that picture. But what happened here is my dad was taking us on a road trip, and he bought us both a bag of pick and mix. And my brother said to me on this trip, he said, Daniel, I will trade you 3 of your foam bananas, which are the absolute god tier of pick and mix, for a mystery prize. Now, being young, being naive, I thought, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to go for this. So I took it. What did I get in return? A single licorice lace. A pick and mix so pathetic that I couldn't even get a picture from Google Images of a single licorice lace. Now, you don't have to be a mathematician to understand this is extremely poor ROI. What the hell has this got to do with SEO, I hear you asking? Well, if you see me later and you've got a foam banana, please do give it to me, firstly. But too often, we're coming to clients and saying, hey, implement our SEO tickets for a mystery SEO prize, a mystery revenue prize. And actually, when we run the numbers, too often that mystery prize is a black licorice lace. And it's not actually worth their time, worth their investment to implement our tickets in the first place. We need to be really clear with why we want our tickets implemented and what the actual business growth behind our tickets is going to be. What should we do first? How do we prioritize? Well, prioritization can, again, be really tricky. And if you find prioritization tricky, try first removing what's not important rather than focusing on, what's the first thing I need to do? What's your best practice but not going to move the needle? What things are the nice to haves but, again, aren't really going to drive change? What that'll leave you with is things that have serious growth, your projects for 2 to 6 months, and your absolute priority tickets that either show huge, huge opportunity or are really holding the site back. At Novos, we use the ICE metric, which is impact times confidence over effort. I've given this talk before, or shown this slide before, and I've had some feedback that actually some people would like to use more. Maybe it might be time, might be money. We find ICE is a good combination of complex enough to give us the data we need, but not so complex that clients, that stakeholders get confused by it. It's really easy to share, but it's not so confusing that people just switch off. There's some quick and easy tactics that can help you to get things implemented to persuade clients. Leverage loss aversion. So humans dislike loss more than they like the equivalent gain. What this means is that instead of talking about £2 million of opportunity, you might want to slightly reframe how you're talking and talk about you're losing out on £2 million. Really subtle distinction, but something that can be powerful if you're struggling to really get buy-in. Compared to competitors as well. Often, when revenue numbers don't work, opportunity numbers don't work, if you just go to them and say, hey, look, your close competitor's doing this and making loads of money from it, that's when the CEO is going to be like, right, stop everything, we need to implement this tomorrow. Humans are social creatures, and so social comparison is really, really powerful. If you don't believe me, as a more sort of personal example, you might not care if some random other person is earning more than you, but if you find out your colleague is on more than you, suddenly that's a massive, massive deal. It's the same thing for clients and SEO. We also need to understand SEO is not a silo. How can our SEO tickets actually benefit other channels? Now, I don't know why, but SEOs seem to be the only channel that cares about site speed. I know we have some paid people in the audience. Start caring about site speed, please, because it can benefit every channel. If we can show and describe to clients or internal stakeholders how we can benefit other channels, we're going to be a lot more convincing, and we're going to get buy-in from other channel owners as well. We also need to remember who all this is really for, aka the customer or the visitor. Too often, we're framing everything as, we're doing it for Google, we're doing it for Googlebot. when actually Googlebot's holding you back. We want to talk about why it benefits the customer. Every SEO change has an impact on the customer, whether that's direct or indirect. And we need to describe exactly how and why our SEO change is better for the customer. When you've got all three, you're set up for success. So going back to the beginning, we lost the client that wouldn't implement anything. Good riddance. We reassembled the dream team for our new client. And we took our learnings from all of this. And what happened? Massive, massive growth. No SEO talk is complete without a graph that completely lacks context. And this is exactly the same. I won't be taking questions on this now or ever. But you can see it goes up and to the right, and that's what matters. If you are struggling to get things implemented, we have a checklist on our website that lists everything I've run through today and some others. You won't need every single one for every single ticket, but it might just give you a helping hand to help convince clients to implement things. Thank you very much.
Need link building or content? Go to fatjoe.com. On-demand marketing services for agencies and teams. Fat Joe.